My name is Danny Gill, and I was born in the Oatlands. I was born in number 40 House Street in 1948, but now I'm 66 years of age now, and this is my recollection of things that happened to me when I lived in the Oatlands of old. What I liked about the Oatlands was a close-knit community when everybody knew each other and looked out for each other. Our parents, our mas and dads, never had all that much money, but we always helped each other where we could. Whichever tenement block or the smaller one-storey, smaller houses in the Oatlands that we lived in, we had this great community spirit. We all knew everybody. We all knew everybody's names and all the names, even of the cats and dogs. Our parents instilled in us to have respect for our elders and to be honest. Tell the truth and shame the devil. That was one of my man's favourite sayings. We also, as Waynes, called people by Mr. and Mrs. So it was Mrs. and Mrs. Wilson or Mrs. and Mrs. Brown, Mr. and Mrs. Kelly. We'd never call them by the first name. That was the respect that had been installed to us by our parents in the Oatlands. So, now, sometimes we call the best friend of our parents, maybe your ma's best friend, where we call her auntie, or if it was a man, we would call him Uncle Bob or Auntie Jeanette. Even though there was no blood ties, it was a sign of respect that our people installed in us. Now, in the back court of our tenement, the same as in every tenement, we had the open middens where we dumped all the rubbish and puddles of water. And actually, this is our playground, the playground for us Waynes. Of course, today now, the health and safety, that wouldn't be allowed. No way. But for us Waynes in the early and mid-50s, 1950s, and the generation before us, this is where we enacted all our games of cowboys and Indians, and in the streets we played football and rounders, or to be politically correct, football and baseball. Kick the can, hide and seek, all these games that we played, all us Waynes. This is our healthy outdoor games, and yes, we might have got dirty and skinned our knees and climbing dikes and walls, but that was our adventure, and it was our childhood growing up in the south side of post-Second World War Glasgow. See, in those far off days, there was hardly any television sets. Television sets, TV sets in our houses, they never started actually to come in to about the late 1950s, early 60s. And as Waynes we had, in those far off days, as Waynes we had no laptops, no mobile phones, iPads or computer games. All our games that we made up ourselves were played outside. And as I said earlier before, we would be playing football and in the streets, and lasses would be playing hopscotch or beds, as they called it. There was almost no motor cars in the streets. Hardly anybody had a car at all. And in those far off days, there was not much chance of getting knocked down in the streets either. Our parents, our mas and dads and grannies, they would all be keeping a watchful eye on us playing in the streets from the tenement windows, hanging out the tenement windows, speaking to each other, or in suicide slang, as we used to call it, windy hanging, where you talk to all your neighbours. And you didn't have to buy a newspaper in those days because you got all your news from your next door neighbours, or when you went to the shops to get your messages. That's where you got all your news from in the suicide. Most people now had a job, although the pay in those days wasn't great that I remember. But Friday nights was the special night of the week when your dad would come home with his pay packet and he'd hand it over to your mother, and your ma would take all the money and put the money by for all the different things that she had to pay for. And then, as Waynes, on that Friday night, we were given money to go down to the fish and chip shop to buy a fish supper, maybe a pickled onion with it. I mean, plenty of salt and vinegar. That was our treat. That was our treat for the weekend, and we loved it. Then we got our pocket money, and so we could maybe go to the shop and buy our sweeties a penny dainty or whatever it was, a penny share. But But most importantly, on the Friday night, we got the money. We got the money to go to the Ritz Picture House on the Saturday morning. Now the Ritz Picture House was on Braehead Street, which is more or less the end of the Oatlands and the beginning of the Hudgerston end of the Gorbals. And we used to go there on a Saturday. We used to go there on Saturday mornings to watch Flash Gordon or Dick Tracy on the big picture screen there. And it was a great time for us Waynes. And in fact, my favourite phrase to sum up living in the Oatlands in those days was, "We had nothing, but we had everything. We had nothing, but we had everything." Meaning, we never had money or anything going in big fancy holidays or fancy cars, but we had everything because we'd all the shops that we wanted, with all the adventure of us playing outside all the time. It was magic. One of the things that always amazed me. Yes, one of the things that always amazed me was there was about 30 Waynes in our back court, taking in our tenement, and what happened then? You were playing with your pals, playing with your wee pals there, and you get a bit hungry with all your running about, like. So you shout up to your mother's window, shout up to your man's window, "Oh ma, gonna throw me down a jelly piece, throw me down a jam sandwich," and instantly your mother, out of all those 30 kids, your mother instantly recognised your own voice. Wasn't that amazing? Blooming amazing. Lastly, I would like to say that our mads and grannies kept our houses very tidy, and each woman who lived in our landing, we had three people living on the landing. 2 people had big kind of houses, and in the middle you had a single end where sometimes a single person would live. Oh, but then again, it could be a married couple with kids. And the thing was, with the women living in those 3 houses, like, they took a weekly turn of washing the stairs and mopping the bucket, and also pipe chalking the sides of the stairs. And nobody ever missed a turn, because in those far off days we had great belief in ourselves and great respect in each other. And I suppose that there was an old saying in the Oatlands: cleanliness is next to godliness. And another thing was, when you look back, you can probably see it in some of the photos that you might see on Facebook nowadays of the old Oatlands. But when you looked up at the windows, all the windows were spotlessly clean, and the net curtains, they were brilliant white, absolutely brilliant white. Now, that's my wee talk about like in the Oatlands. Next topic I'm going to go into now is Richmond Park, or as we used to call it, the Ritchie. Yes? Well, what can you say about Richmond Park? It was an oasis of the Oatlands tenements. It was actually a day's outing for you and me and your wee gang of pals that crossed over Rulligan Road at one of the Belisha beacons. That's the zebra crossings, to go over to the park. You had at one end you had a sand pit, or as we called it, the Sawney Pond, where toddlers could sit and play with a bucket and spade, and where their ma's or grannies could sit there watching them. It was also by the Ritchie that you had, in one part of the Ritchie, you had a wee putting green, where for a few pennies you could play a wee round of golf, miniature golf that is, like, you know. Although I must say, sometimes if your ma gave you the penny or the 2 pence to go and play on the putting green, you actually spent that in the sweet shop on the way. But then again, sure, that's wins for you. Then the other part of the Ritchie, you had the rockery and all the flower bed arrangements to look at. And I must say that in the early to mid 50s, the park keeper and all the garden arrangers did such a magnificent job to keep the Ritchie Park spotlessly clean, and it was a pleasure. It was really a pleasure to go there, and you spend the whole day. You spend the whole day there, especially in the summer holidays when you were a bit off school for 6 or 7 weeks.